stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Ruffridge.
Here.
Ugarte.
Here.
Carey.
Present.
Chilson.
Present.
Parker. Hutchings. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is approval of the agenda and consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda? Thank you, Ms. Hutchings. A second?
I second it.
Thank you, Mr. Ugarte. Are there any changes to the agenda or consent agenda? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I move, at the request of the administration, I move to suspend the rules and address business item GC1, Action Memorandum 2021-012, request to extend sewer main approximately 1,500 feet along Whistle Hill Loop prior to agenda item 7, public hearings. That is the motion.
Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Carey.
Mr. Mayor.
Is there any other changes?
Yes,
Schultz.
Mr. Mayor. I would move to add laydown resolution 2021-040, supporting the efforts of the Kenaitze Indian Tribe to secure grant funding for fixed route bus services on the Central Kenai Peninsula to the agenda as agenda item 8B5.
Are there any objections to adding that to the agenda? Seeing none, resolution 2021-040 has been added to the consent agenda. Would the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Mayor Whitney, the resolution was added to the agenda.
I'm sorry?
The resolution was added to the agenda, not the consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, it's been added to the agenda.
Okay, so the consent agenda is approval of the July 28th, 2021 council meeting minutes, new businesses, ordinances, ordinance 2021-17, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $1,139,130 in the COVID-19 Relief Special Revenue Fund for a grant received from the State of Alaska Department of Commerce, Community, and Economic Development as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, introduced by the city manager, public hearing on August 25th, 2021. New business resolutions, resolution 2021-38, supporting the efforts of the Kenai Peninsula Borough to secure a grant from the Alaska U.S. Congressional Delegation for spruce bark beetle mitigation within the Kenai Peninsula Borough and the cities within the Kenai Peninsula Borough, introduced by the city manager. Resolution 2021-39, authorizing the purchase of a 2021 RPM 36R loader mounted snow blower for the Streets Department from BSI Equipment, LLC, in the amount of $206,095, introduced by the city manager. And that is your consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any public comments on any of the items just read by the clerk? Seeing no one wishing to speak, the approval of the agenda and consent agenda is back before the council. Are there any council objections to approving the agenda and consent agenda? Hearing none, the agenda and consent agenda are approved. Moving on to item 4 on the agenda, presentation with prior notice. We will have a presentation by Shannon Davis, Executive Director of the Soldotna Chamber of Commerce, on the Visitor Center Quarterly Report.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very pleased to be here with you this evening. That said, I will be ducking out immediately following my report to head to the park, which also explains my attire this evening. Which is really a perfect segue into the beginning of the report that was sent to all you all. I want to acknowledge once again how thrilled we were to have been able to concentrate on such a wonderful bringing together of our community in the heart of Soldotna this summer. I really can't give enough credit to the city, especially to Parks and Recreation, for helping us plan and pull off this concert series. We tried to set the right tone right out of the gate with our party in the park that we had on May 26th. We partnered with the City of Soldotna, the State of Alaska, Soldotna Professional Pharmacy, the Kenai Fire Department to incentivize vaccinations, and we had a wonderful vaccination booth there. at the park that day. We raffled off some incredible prizes that the city of Soldotna helped gather. The Soldotna Chamber provided a $2,500 voucher for flights on Alaska Airlines that was purchased through a program with the state chamber that they had provided funding for that. So that was raffled that day, as well as we purchased $15,000 in $25 gift cards that have been used throughout the summer, both at the park, at Kenai Public Health, and also at the vaccination location that is at the corner, run by Soldotna Professional Pharmacy at the Y. We've heard that these are very, very popular, and we're out of them now, but the state chamber is trying to work with us to get some more to use in the program. That day, on May 26th, we were very fortunate to have Ann Zink and Commissioner Crum come to the park as well after an invitation, and we got some great news coverage from it. So just all around, it was a fabulous day, and actually one of the last sunny days that we had in the park all summer long, but it was a great way to kick things off. On the marketing front, once again, I have to give kudos to the city for making such a meaningful investment to bringing visitors here this summer. It is going to pay off for years to come. This has been a very robust campaign. I hope you've seen the commercials that have been running, both on cable and on network TV. Have the digital ads served to you when you're scrolling through Facebook or other applications. If you've been in Anchorage, you may have seen our ads on People Mover buses or displays at the airport. At the end of this campaign, I'm going to give you reports that have all of the boring data with all the number of impressions and things along those lines. Right now, I think we can see the proof in the pudding. We are bringing people to Soldotna. This has been a very busy summer. They're still here. People are showing up in town. We're getting the phone calls from Anchorage saying, hey, we saw your ad. Can you tell us where we should be staying? Things along those lines. So it's definitely making an impression and working. We're also actively developing new assets such as photography, video, and professionally written content about Soldotna that's going to be paying dividends for years to come. We finally launched our new website in June. The site has two different faces. One is for visitors, and then one is for our community and our business community, and also people who are interested in relocating here. The site is beautiful. We put a lot of energy into finding outstanding visuals for it. We've had a great response so far, but we all know that websites are a continual work in progress, and we are always open to critiques or changes or suggestions on things to add. And we're very fortunate that the site was built in such a way that the staff can maintain it and make changes to it in the office. Our social channels, they're continuing to perform well. The numbers that you see in your packet are through June. So third quarter is already showing some really impressive results for us from all the marketing that we've been doing, and I'll be excited to share that with you when I come meet with you next time. Looking at the visitor center itself, we were very fortunate to have two of our attendants return who have been with us for several years. They're really incredible representatives of Soldotna. We do have 3 other attendants who have been working there, but everybody is very part-time. Staffing has been an issue for us at the center this summer, much as it has been for many of our member businesses throughout Soldotna. For those reasons, we did operate on a slightly scaled back hours compared to 2019. We were not open on Sundays, and we closed every day at 6 rather than 7 o'clock. For this reason, I believe that our through-the-door numbers are comparable to 2019, although when you look at the graph, you will see that we were down compared to 2019, but we weren't down drastically, and I do believe that a lot of that can be contributed to the less hours that we were open. I'm really looking forward to 2022 when we will be back to those full-time hours. Let's see, a few other things. With the removal of the beetle kill in front of the visitor center, gave us an opportunity to save one of the stumps. We asked the city to leave one of the stumps, and there's a picture in your packet of the carved gnome house that we created in front of the visitor center. It kind of adds to some of the other photography opportunities that are there. Again, shout out to Parks and Recreation. The flowers are stunning. And I frequently have my window open and I can hear the visitors talking about all the opportunities that there are right out front of the visitor center for pictures. I can't give enough credit to the gardeners that work for the city and what they have turned. It's just a delight for the eyes for our visitors now, especially compared to how it looked 10, 15 years ago. I just love it. Let's see, circling back to the music series, I want to again recognize the importance of our partnership to make this series a reality for our community. It's really a perfect example of the public, nonprofit, and private sector partnerships. All of us working together has really become something magical, and this is the year that everything has just clicked, and it is just working. The weather has been less than stellar, but even with that, we've seen impressive crowds, and the vendors are also doing very well in the park. It's really a melting pot. We've got grandparents hanging out with teenagers that have blue hair, and we've got 30-somethings there with their babies in carriages, and it's such a wonderful feeling, and I'm so grateful to be a part of it. And again, thank the city for your investment. Upcoming, we're running our annual photo contest through September 18th. And we do have an art exhibit that is hanging in the visitor center right now. It's the first one that we've had there. We're featuring beautiful Alaskan felt work by Ruthie Towner, and we would encourage you to stop by and see it. We've got quite an impressive collection. Again, looking forward, we have our pie auction because Shelley Sainer always is such a big part of that. I wanted to shout out the date. It's October 16th, and also give credit to Joel Todd with Parks and Recreation for calling me as soon as he realized that our pie auction was scheduled over the first in-home game of the Brown Bears and suggested we might want to move it, so we did. So again, just thank you all for everything that you do to make Soldotna wonderful, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Mr. Carey.
I very much appreciate the kind remarks you make about the city staff, and it's deserved. However, I'd also like to add that the work you do and your staff does, that without your expertise and your energy and your fine ideas, things would not go nearly as well as with your staff. I was particularly interested when I heard you mention the issue of staffing. I'm part of a couple of different enterprises, nonprofits in town that are having a very large difficulty. And so what I want to ask, do you have any guidance, any ideas, any things that are working to get people to want to fill the many, many jobs all over town?
I wish I did, Councilmember Carey. I do. We've been studying it. We're trying to figure out why it's continuing to happen. We're just not sure. I wish I had an answer for you.
I thank you, and I was afraid I was going to get that answer, but I wanted to try. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hugarte.
Is there anything else we could do to help you to make the Wednesday market and the music scene like more productive? You know, bring other acts or anything. You know, like you said, I've been there through the Wednesday markets when they have the music, and it's packed. You know, and I was just wondering maybe something that the city can do to help out more. If we do that and we bring people from Homer, from Ninilchik, Anchorage, they come and they spend money here with us, you know. So, and it's a beautiful town, and right by the river, you can't beat that scenery. So
thank you for saying that. And I have to reiterate again that this year especially, everything is clicking on all cylinders. It's taken us probably 5 years to get to where everybody knows their niche and is just really, we're doing it, and it's going amazingly well, including the additional investment in marketing to bring people for it. So, but thank you for asking that question.
yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from the council? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney, and thank you, Shannon, for your report. When I was driving here from my house, I had to go by a number of eating establishments, and I can't see the one that's up on the hill. I can't see their parking lot, but I could see all the others, and they were all jammed. They were all full. So whatever you're doing, obviously it's working, because the restaurants here in town, the ones I drove by 4 and 5, all of their parking lots were full. So good job.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker.
Any other comments? Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
not
very
only
much.
your report, but for everything you do for our local businesses and the city of Soldotna.
Thank you,
do
Mayor
an
Whitney.
outstanding job, and so does your staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm off to the park.
Have fun. We'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, public comments and presentations, 3 minutes per speaker. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on any item not appearing on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to assembly and legislative reports. We have a representative from the borough, Mr. Cox.
Yes, Tyson Cox. I do live in Soldotna, and I'm also the representative for Soldotna on the Borough Assembly. I was going to make a couple of comments. One thing to watch for in our next meeting will be the mayor's bringing forward a joint resolution that I'm assuming you guys will see at a later date that is going to, the borough, I'll read one of the whereases. The borough has submitted a request for federal aid in the amount of $35 million to Alaska's U.S. congressional delegation for spruce bark beetle mitigation. So be aware that that's going to be coming your way, hopefully, if that passes us, which I would be surprised if it didn't, but I don't always want to say that it will for sure. A couple other things I was going to mention is I do want to thank the city of Soldotna, the Chamber, Triumphant Theater. I know that was a joint effort in putting that together. We have a fantastic music at the park, but we also now hopefully will start a tradition, have another option for the park on a weekend like that. Is we went to the first one and there was probably, I didn't do an actual count, but there had to have been 1,500 people there. There was a lot of people. And it was a fantastic show, and they did a wonderful job. And I personally appreciate it, and I want to thank you for it. There were lots of little kids there singing the songs. It was a great time. I also wanted to mention is my reason for coming tonight is I am curious as to the conversation you guys will have tonight about Resolution 2021-037, authorizing city mayor to enter into a contract with the borough for the 911 dispatch services for 2022. I will be listening and seeing how that goes. And then I was also going to mention that I noticed that Soldotna still has the planning commission seat still vacant. If there's anything that I can do to help resolve this so that we can continue to have representation on that board as a city, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I will do whatever I can to help with that. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the council? Sorry? Go ahead, Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Thank you, Assemblymember Cox, for coming tonight. And I noticed with interest a headline in the paper this week about the mayor planning to potentially amend the borough code so that he can open up the planning commission. The mayor could appoint whoever they wanted to the planning commission. And I would ask that before the assembly take action, if an ordinance were to come forth, that you get input from the affected cities throughout the borough on the proposed ordinance. So I do have concerns that maybe the ordinance isn't necessarily following Alaska statute. So be interested to see it when it comes forth, and hopefully we have the opportunity to provide input.
If I may, I appreciate that very much, because being on the borough assembly, but also being a resident in the city of Soldotna, I would have to agree with you is that I think it's very vital that those positions be filled with people from those areas. And so any input that would be from any of the councils, not just Soldotna, I would be very interested in seeing, because as you said, Title 29 does say that each area, if you're a first-class city or a home rule city, that you have that option to have someone on there, and it is to be selected from the cities. So I appreciate that.
Any other comments? I will voice what Vice Mayor Parker said, that I have not seen this proposed ordinance. It seems to be floating out there, but without any visual sign of it at this point in time, nor of the opinion that keeps being thrown out, saying that they have an opinion that says we can do this, but nobody seems to ever see that opinion either. And so I'm very concerned about that. I know some of the other mayors in the borough have voiced concern along with the cities, and I would imagine there is going to be some opposition to it. In fact, it came up at the AML meeting in Fairbanks this last week in front of the Alaska Council of Mayors as to taking a look at this and taking a stand on it. So we'll be keeping an eye on it.
Well, and as far as that goes, is I heard there, in fact, I have seen a draft of an ordinance, and it is just a draft at this time because no one has sponsored that piece of legislation. But there is a draft that is circulating as far as I know, because I believe Homer has seen it, and I think Seldovia has seen it as well. If somebody wanted it from me, all I would ask is that you allow me to first ask and make sure that's okay to put out there. Otherwise, I have no problems giving that to people.
Let me ask you this, it has not been introduced as of yet, or is it on the agenda, or?
It is not on our agenda for our next meeting, so no, it hasn't been introduced. I have not seen a sponsor to it as of yet.
And like I said, I'm very concerned about the communications we've had that has cited an opinion that does not seem to be available to anyone to look at. And I would definitely like to see that opinion, and I'm sure the other cities would also like to see that opinion.
I would have to agree with that.
Okay. Any other comments from the council? Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr.
You're welcome.
Cox.
Thank you.
Moving along to the next item, motion to suspend the rules to address Action Memorandum 2021-012 prior to public hearings was approved at the setting of the agenda. So that will be Action Memorandum 2021-012 to request an extended sewer main approximately 1,500 feet along Whistle Hill Loop and direction to the administration regarding a draft development agreement and potential city financial contribution. This was presented by the city manager. Report from the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Within the packet, starting on page 67, we've got some information about a request from Henry and Mary Kroll, who many of you know are business owners, have developed property here in Soldotna. And they've been engaging with our Public Works Director, Kyle, I would say over many months, potentially, about their needs for their sewer system up on the hill there where they're located off of Whistle Hill Loop. Our current septic system and our water system stops short of those properties. So currently we've got municipal water and sewer about to Fred Meyer's, crosses the highway kind of near the map shop. And that's the terminus of our municipal system. They're located about 1,500 feet up the hill from that location and had been engaged with Mr. Cornelis on conversations about whether it was feasible and if it's possible to get an extension of those municipal services to meet their current needs at the property and potentially future development opportunities. And they've described those very well, I think, in the letter that was included in the packet. So we had a conversation several meetings ago about how to approach requests to extend municipal services. Specifically, that request was outside city limits. So we are still working on coming back with those policy options for the council to consider. This request we're treating a bit differently because this is a property inside the city limits that has a need. And as we do, we work with them on a kind of one-on-one basis to try and see if we have the ability within our utility system to meet that need. What we're describing here is one option that's available to them, which would be a negotiated development agreement. The city has experience entering into these agreements in the past. It's one way that municipal infrastructure can be built. Kyle Cornelis is here and can kind of speak to the nuts and bolts of that process, but we've generally described it for you here to allow the Krolls to present to the council and get your feedback on whether this is a project that you want us to engage with them on moving forward, and to talk about one of the critical pieces, I think, for them and for the city, which would be the financials, and seeing if there's some understanding at this early stage about how that could be, those costs could potentially be shared. So with that, I will maybe defer. I know the Krolls are here, their engineer is here with them as well. I think it'd be appropriate, Mr. Mayor, if you concur that the Krolls be able to present some information and available to answer questions to the council, but Mr. Cornelis and myself are available to answer questions as well. And ultimately, at the end of the discussion today, what we would be seeking feedback from the council is giving us direction, potentially, if there's interest in this project moving forward, giving us direction to really start formalizing that agreement. It would come back to the council when it's put together. It's a fairly substantial legal document, but we would work with our attorneys, we'd work with the Krulls, and come back to you with that document. So really, at the end of the conversation today, direction from the council would be helpful to us if that's something you want us to pursue moving forward. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. and Mrs. Kroll, would you like to make a presentation? Could you please state your name and address for the record?
And can you, if the green light's not on, press stop. Green light's on. Okay. I'm Henry Krull,
Mary Kroll.
and we live in Soldotna. Actually, we're outside the city limits, but we have businesses here in Soldotna.
We have experienced an unprecedented summer this summer in terms of business and visitors to our properties. We currently have a private well and septic system. This is our third summer we've been in business. Within the first 6 months that we opened, our first septic system failed catastrophically, and we had to abandon a leach field and put in a second leach field and a lift station to accommodate the needs that we had for both Addie Camp and Brew at 602, as well as Frames and Things. We have currently been surviving with that system. However, we've been told well, it's obvious that it's not a matter of if the system fails, it's a matter of when our current system will fail again, and we no longer have any room on our property to continue to develop our private septic system.
And the reason for the failures is poor soil. It's all clay up there. So building or designing another septic system is just not an option. So we looked into the option of an extension of the city sewer line along the Sterling Highway corridor within the city limits of Soldotna to help us in our current predicament as well as to allow us to expand further. And we have, it's included in detail in the document that we provided to you. We've purchased property adjacent to Whistle Hill. We are in the process right now of purchasing additional rail cars. We have plans to bring those rail cars in, but we literally can't do anything until we get our septic system resolved. And hopefully that means connection to the city sewer. Otherwise, we're stymied. We're not only are our current businesses in jeopardy, but we have no ability to do any future development. And we've brought a lot to the city. We started this process 3 or 4 years ago. We've been before the council here before for other related reasons, but we've brought a lot to the city. We've brought visitors to the area. We're becoming a destination in and of itself. We see visitors from a lot of people from Anchorage. We see a lot of out-of-town visitors, and we serve the citizens of Soldotna and Kenai and other communities here as well. And we want to do more, and we want to do more for the city. And bring more people there and have people spend more money here. But we are waylaid by this septic problem. And so that's why we're coming to the council to ask for assistance. We've invested a substantial amount of money in engineering already to see what we can do. And we've also got a bid back on the connection that is simply cost prohibitive for us to do alone. We might be able to scrape together enough and borrow money to put in a sewer line connection, but leaves nothing further to add any additional services or development in that part of the city.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council? Seeing none, thank you very much for your comments. We'll bring it back before the council.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney.
Mr. Carey.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we proceed forward with Action Memorandum 2021-012, with the purpose being to direct that we enter into negotiations with Whistle Hill on the matter involved. And I hope this motion will allow us to discuss it fully here now.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Mr. Hagarte. Any discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Carey.
I've got a number of questions, but I'd like to deal with just one at a time so it doesn't get fractured. And that is the issue dealing with annexation. And so I'm hoping that the manager can assist me in terms of the properties and where they stand and where they would stand with the issue of annexation that's now pending before us.
Mr. Carey, through the mayor, I don't believe that there's any relevance necessarily to the outcome of annexation. As we mentioned, as these properties are inside the city limits, they're just beyond the scope of our current system. We would be normally engaging with them as we've done with other subdivision developers or commercial property developers when they have a need for municipal system to be extended to them. So I would say it's not particularly relevant to the discussion tonight.
Excellent.
Mr. Carey, again?
Madam Manager, would it be correct to say that the reason that we went no further in terms of a sewer line and other lines was that there simply was nothing there to extend to at the time we limited where our lines are now?
Through the mayor, Mr. Carey, I'd like to ask Public Works Director Kyle Cornelis to speak to that question. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for the question. That's entirely possible. I can't say for sure why the extent terminated at that point, but that's a very likely scenario that there was not a purpose to go further. Also likely is that the terrain is pretty challenging to extend municipal services in that direction. It's kind of due to the topography.
Thank you.
Anything else from the council? Mr. Jolson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I direct this question to the administration. Referencing the action memorandum, the example of Walgreens, we approached that with a 25-75% split, with the city bearing 25%, Walgreens bearing 75% of the cost on that project. Do you have any other examples of recent expansion and the last several years with business partnerships and how we've handled those splits?
Thank you, Councilmember Chilson. Through the mayor, the Walgreens development was negotiated by my predecessor. I was, of course, the planning director at the time. What the city agreed to pay was 25% of the cost of one portion of that project. So in terms of the scope of that full project, I think the improvements were well in excess of $2 million. The city negotiated just 25% of, I think, 47th Street improvements. So it ends up being much less than 25% total. Other examples of development agreements that I'm aware of, and then I'll ask Kyle to supplement my memory, it's typical more so with subdivisions. So when a property developer, Legacy Loop subdivision, East Redoubt, Westgate subdivision, and then there was a new rural cap subdivision of homes that went in, our code requires that prior to finishing that plat, that the public improvements be put in at their own expense. So we've had several recent examples where property developers built residential subdivisions and had to build the road infrastructure entirely at their cost. The vehicle would be similar, the development agreement, the document itself, but in each of those cases, there was no city contribution. So besides the Walgreens agreement, I'm not aware, and Kyle's shaking his head, we're not aware of a recent example where the city would have partnered to share the cost.
The only one I think that I would add that was also before my time is I believe that there was in one of the subdivisions, Westgate, one of the larger subdivisions, I think there was city participation for perhaps a lift station, some of the lift station costs. So, but that, I can't confirm that. That was quite a while ago.
And if I could just kind of wrap up the question, I think particularly because much of the commercial development has been infill development within the scope of our existing system. So we are seeing development, but now we're starting, and we've brought forward requests that we've discussed in recent meetings. We are seeing more requests for expansion, and so it's just not so common that it occurs within the city.
Got it. But as far as we can recall, recent expansions within city limits have historically operated under the precedent that it is the developer's burden to bear that cost entirely, with the exception of Walgreens, in which we bared no more than 25%.
To Mr. Chilson, to answer that question through the mayor, I guess I would comment that it really depends on whether the council sees value in treating it as if there's overall public benefit.
Sure.
not to complicate the conversation, but special assessment districts are an example where we, the city, do share the cost with property owners because we agreed through the council's decision and those owners that it's a mutually beneficial project. There's been a handful of those projects recently in commercial and residential settings where the cost sharing is anywhere from 50-50 up to 75% funded by the city. So it really is the question to be really looked at on a case-by-case basis. We don't have precedent to follow or guidelines. It's really something that we would have to really dig into with the council and try and present this for you for your decision making.
Okay, and I'm absolutely fully supportive of doing some form of cost sharing when there's a broader community benefit there. So if we were to move forward on this, it would be my recommendation that we explore potential other build-offs that we could make off the system to other people in that neighborhood if there's interest there in that community. But if we do pass this motion tonight, would this be at the 25% that you recommended in the action memorandum in the packet, or would you have the ability to negotiate that up or down depending on where those negotiations lead?
Mr. Chilson, through the mayor, Mr. Carey's motion, as I heard it, did not include a specific dollar amount, but it would be my strong suggestion that the council at least initiate that conversation tonight, because negotiating this document will require quite a bit of effort and resources, and I think for the Krolls and for the city to have kind of an understanding of potentially whether there's interest, and if so, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, it might make the difference in the project being feasible or not. So I would encourage the council to have that conversation started tonight so that we could at least have a sense of the level of interest among the council in participating financially, and if we could maybe narrow that down, what that might look like.
Okay, thank you.
Ms.
Mr. Mayor?
Hutchins?
So I was just going to, there are a couple of questions I have. One of them is a statement, is when Fred Meyer moved in, that had to be handled by Fred Meyer and the property owner. And they handled the whole thing. The city didn't produce any assistance in that. And the other question I have is, I think before we can decide what percentage we might be looking at, is we need to look at what the whole cost is going to be. So what are the Krolls going to pay for? They've already paid for engineering. Is that going to be added into this picture before we make the decision, or is that their cost, and then we're going to look at what comes afterwards?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Mr. Rufford.
Thank you. Wanted to just go off a little bit of what Stephanie was talking about earlier with special assessment districts. I did a lot of reading about that from our city policy and statute this week. And part of my recommendation would be, in this scenario, it seems like there would be property owners that are near the Whistle Hill development that potentially could benefit from water and sewer development. However, it's a small enough ownership of those properties where maybe a special assessment district would not be the appropriate route. It would be, in my opinion, that finding some sort of middle ground that's not technically a special assessment district, but is still some version of presenting funds for the ability to expand development within our city limits. We heard during the annexation process a number of times that the expansion of services was the key component that people were looking for from city. And I think this is an opportunity to do so. I would be supportive of a match from the city, and I would certainly welcome the discussion of what that amount would be. But I think there's room for discussion around the expansion of services when they don't fall into a special assessment district, potentially due to the small number of property owners that would be affected. It seems the development at the top of Whistle Hill is a lot of property and a lot of different services if the project goes according to plan, and would eventually be a huge benefit to the city.
Are there any other comments from the council? Vice Mayor Parker?
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. A couple of questions first. Is St. Elias currently connected to city water and sewer, or did we just go over to the map shop?
Councilman Parker, through the mayor, yes, they are connected. The current alignment is on the east side of the highway, abutting Fred Meyer, and then at Charkathmai it crosses, and the final manhole is near the map shop.
Okay, thank you. And then as the Crolls are looking to expand and solve their current issue, are we talking strictly sewer, or are we talking sewer and water?
Councilmember Parker, to the mayor, the request, I believe, is for sewer only.
Okay. So, as other council members have said, I believe that we need to establish and have a consistent policy, and we shouldn't be looking at, we did one business this way, another business this way. We established a precedent with Walgreens. I like that precedent that we established there. And I appreciate all that the Crolls have done at Whistle Hill and are going to hopefully expand and continue to do, but it's establishing and setting a precedent and not jumping all over the place is where I'm coming from at this. So if we pass a motion to direct the administration to proceed further, my thinking would be that it would be along the same lines as what we did with Walgreens.
Mr. Carey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I probably need the assistance of the clerk, but I'd like to amend the motion that I made. Reading from what we have before us, we're told if the council does determine the project should receive. So I'd like to amend that to the motion that we would recommend authorizing up to 25% of the construction costs, capped at a maximum of $100,000. End of the amendment. And again, that's what we did with Walgreens.
Is there a second? Ms. Hutchings? Discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Ruffridge.
Thank you. I want to go back again to the special assessment district. And although Walgreens was a singular business, it affected a much greater retail area and the possibility for expansion in that area. It seems odd to me that we have a special assessment district, part of our code, that would fund between 50 and 75%, and wouldn't at least pursue the option of the minimum of a special assessment district at 50%. That would be, and in fact, I'll just move to make that amendment to Mr. Carey's motion that we amend that 50%.
You're kind of breaking up. Am I hearing you saying you want to amend the amendment, which we haven't voted on yet? Go ahead, City Clerk.
Thank you. Right now, the First Amendment was not voted on, and it was to move forward, to direct the administration to do the development agreement. The secondary amendment, which is on the floor now, is the 25%, 100,000. So the secondary amendment would have to be resolved before another secondary amendment could be brought forward.
Did you hear that, Mr. Ruffridge?
I did.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Mr. Chilson?
Just a question on this line in general. Looking at the GIS map for the lines that go out the way towards Fred Meyer, it looks like they're getting kind of a ways out there towards the edge of the city. So if we were to further extend this and add a big commercial property at the end of the line, what's going to be the capacity of that line to support additional tie-ins if we're looking at doing a service area up there to support more than just Whistle Hill's property?
Thank you, Mr. Chilson. Through the mayor, Kyle and I discussed this earlier today, and it's a very important point, I think. He was able to reach Joe, the engineer, earlier today. And In part, we don't fully have the answer to that yet. In terms of capacity, we have capacity. So our utility system has the bandwidth, so to say, to carry extra development, even in excess of what's being proposed here. The piece of information that we don't have yet that we would want to look into further is the feasibility of actually the properties in between tying in. As Kyle referenced, the topography is a bit challenging there. This alignment where we're kind of currently envisioning it is between Whistle Hill Loop and the Sterling Highway. So if you think of those properties to the west, they would potentially be boring under Whistle Hill Loop to tie in as a service line. And so something that I don't believe is included within the preliminary cost estimating work that was done was creating those service stub outs right now. So that would potentially be an extra cost. As part of that, we would be looking at the feasibility of doing that now, or the feasibility of a property owner down the road to be able to do that themselves. And it may be that that would be a challenging project for them to undertake, given what we know about the layout. Unfortunately, we just don't have with much specificity the answer to that today.
Okay, well, given the lack of knowns on that and the potential expenses, and we don't even know how feasible this would be for further expansion, I would be comfortable with proceeding with negotiations at the 25% as proposed by Councilman Carey, and then potentially amending to a higher rate, like 50% as proposed by Councilman Ruffridge, when we have confirmation that we can feasibly expand off of that for other customers in the area. So that's where I'm at.
Vice Mayor Parker.
Could I ask Councilman Chilson to please use your microphone, because I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, it's on. I just might not have it close enough. There we go.
I do have a question for the administration, and hopefully it's time to ask it under this amendment. Have we ever, most of the SAD districts that I recall have been for road improvements. Have we ever done one for a sewer or water extension?
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. The answer is yes. So some of the residential projects you're probably thinking of, Diane Ridgewood or Endicott, were paving only. When we did Tyee, that included a bit of a water extension. We also did Sterling Street, which was a residential paving sidewalk project that also included a bit of extension of that utility system. So it really, this is the, SAD would be the mechanism that would be appropriate for road infrastructure as well as utility infrastructure. I think the borough has two separate acronyms for those programs. Ours are just, they would both be appropriate to be combined under what we call the SAD.
And my memory serves me correctly, those were usually for a 10-year term?
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Yes, so one critical difference in what we were discussing as the development agreement versus the special assessment district. When we enter into a development agreement, typically the developer, that private property owner, is hiring the contractors, they are financing the project, they are building it. And at least in the Walgreens example, the city was issuing a reimbursement after the fact. After a warranty period, after that's constructed at their own expense, they turn that infrastructure over to the city to take on. Special assessment district is in reverse. So a special assessment district, the city finances the project, the city constructs and oversees the management, and then we bill out over a 10-year period, typically 10 years, the expense of that project to the property owners. So it's just a different approach, as I mentioned, to different ways that infrastructure can be built in the city.
And one last question. Could we consider like a hybrid system where special assessment district where it applies to only one party?
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I'd want to review the code, but special assessment districts by definition are projects that benefit a small number of parcels, and it's a way for those to be financed and constructed by the city. I would have to evaluate. We've got several criteria, and it would be a case-by-case basis. So we would look at this project, look at those criteria in our code to see whether it could satisfy them if it was just a single property. I would say that would probably be fairly unusual. If this was a project that was going to move forward as an SAD, the city determines which properties are benefited by the improvements. So the city is in the position to say, these are the properties that will benefit from this project. It would likely be more than a single project.
So it's something we could look at and consider.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Just the other comment I'll make is just urgency and timeline. So the SAD process involves lots of public notice, lots of formal meetings. I think the one advantage of a development agreement, potentially, it can be a bit more nimble and it can move quicker if that's something that is both in the city's and the property owner's best interest.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment for 25%? Seeing none.
Mr. Mayor.
I heard somebody.
Oh, that's me. I'm sorry. Just one quick question for the city manager. Have we ever done a special assessment district for commercial property for water and sewer? Other than the Walgreens project?
Councilmember Ruffridge, through the mayor. So the Tyee project was commercially zoned. That's off of East Marydale, and it had a small extension of water and sewer. At the same time, then, remember the city considered an SAD for Aspen Street, so the paving of Aspen Street. Ultimately, the city ended up just constructing that project on our own as a capital project. It would not be unusual. It would not be outside the scope of that program to do utility for commercial development. But other than the Tyee example, I'm not able to come up with another one to offer.
Any further discussion on the amendment? The clerk, please call the roll on the amendment.
Councilmember Ugarte.
Yes.
Carey.
Yes.
Chilson.
Yes.
Parker. Hutchings.
Yes.
Ruffridge.
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Okay, the motion to amend to 25% share passed on a 6-0 vote. And we're back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Ruffridge.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you guys can hear me or not, but wanted to go off of what Mr. Chilson was saying a little bit earlier. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to have a range of funding, but in the chance that the city is going to be extending or helping to extend services, I think we would want it to be available to as many potential properties as possible, and would be willing to potentially fund up to 50% if those other properties were a part of that. I'm not sure if that's something that's feasible or not. Maybe that's something Kyle could speak to, but I do like the idea of it being usable by other properties in that general area.
Are you going to make a motion, Mr. Ruffridge?
I think that was just more of a question. One, if that's possible to extend to those other properties, and then two, if it's not helpful to have a range to the administration of potential percentage of funding.
Ms. Queen.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Ruffridge. To the mayor, what I will say is that this would not be the final opportunity for the council to make that decision. So what we would do is work very expeditiously with the property owners, the Kralls, and our attorney, as I said, and their engineer to get these documents together. That agreement will come back in front of the council, and attached to that agreement will be essentially the plans, the drawings that show exactly the service connections, if they're incorporated, the extent, and at that point, I think we would have, with a higher degree of accuracy, a cost estimate that takes it to a higher level. And so there is some flexibility for the council to allow us to work with them and bring back something that's in a higher degree of detail, pinned down on what those improvements look like exactly. And that will come back to you as a resolution authorizing us to enter into that agreement and appropriating the funds. And so I wanted to at least let folks know that if a decision tonight, I appreciate the guidance, that will be really helpful for us, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the final opportunity for the council to consider that.
Just,
Understood. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Rufford.
It was just a thank you. Sorry.
Go. Your chance. Got something else to say, Mr. Rufford? I know as soon as I say something, he will. I just wanted to clarify something on that amendment, that it was 25% to a maximum of $100,000. So we're back to the main motion. Any further discussion on that? Mr. Carey?
I appreciate very much the administration working with these individuals. And again, I think it's a good part of city and community working together. This is a very important commercial aspect of the city that has a lot of room for growth. And so again, I just want to say I'm very appreciative of the work we're doing here tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Hugarte?
I agree with Mr. Carey. We've been talking about expanding and bringing more businesses into the city, and you know, like he says, it's gonna be, God willing, it'll be something prosperous for the city. So I am happy that we're working with people, with local business owners, so that we could do that, to show that we want to work with them and we want to be what we all are here, family. So thank you, Mr. Carey.
Seeing no further discussion, call the roll, please.
Mayor Whitney, can I state the motion in full?
Okay.
Before we call it, thank you. Direction to the administration to draft a development agreement with the Krolls for the purpose of extending the sewer main to serve their property, and authorizing the city to provide funding of 25% of the construction costs, capped at a maximum of $100,000.
Okay. Go ahead and call the roll.
Councilmember Carey,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Parker, Hutchings,
Yes.
Ruffridge,
Yes.
Hugarte.
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
The motion to pass, our motion passes on a 6-0 vote. Thank you. And that gives you the administration enough direction? I do have one question, but it's just not on the motion or anything, but if that line was extended, could a water line be extended at the same time?
Well, you know, I'm going to, Mr. Mayor, pass that question to Mr. Cornelis.
Thank you for the question, Mayor. Yes, from a feasibility standpoint, it would be quite expensive. Furthermore, the physical piping could be done with some directional boring, but as it stands with our distribution system, I don't believe we'd have the pressure to reach those elevations. So there would need to be a booster station installed, and a pretty significant capital investment.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving along to item 7 on the agenda, which is public hearing. Public hearings on Resolution 2021-035, authorizing the issuance of a letter of non-objection to the Marijuana Control Board for licensee renewal, Croy's Enterprise LLC, a retail marijuana store doing business as Pine Street Cannabis Company, introduced by the city manager. May I have a motion to adopt?
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Parker. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Hugarte. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. Our municipal code requires that renewals for cannabis businesses come before the council as a public hearing item. The request was circulated to all department heads, and none of the city departments had any reason for objection. Similarly, the borough informed us that this business is compliant with tax collection. Therefore, we recommend to the council that the letter of non-objection be issued. Thank you.
Thank you. The public hearing is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, it is back before the council. Are there any council comments? Seeing none, I will call for the vote, please.
Councilmember Hugarte,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Parker, Hutchings,
Yes.
Ruffridge,
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Resolution 2021-035 as passed on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to item B, and that is ordinance 2021-015, approving the fiscal year 2022 capital budget and increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $495,000 in the general fund and $495,000 in the small capital projects fund, introduced by the city manager. And there will be a substitute ordinance presented after the public hearing here. So may I have a motion to enact? Ms. Hutchings.
I'll make a motion to enact ordinance 2021-015, approving the fiscal year 2022 capital budget and increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $495,000 in the general fund and $495,000 in the small capital projects fund.
May I have a second? Mr.
Yes.
Carey. Thank you. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. This ordinance would appropriate funding for projects that were identified in year one on the 5-year capital plan that was recently approved by the council. The purpose of the substitute, which is in front of you tonight, is that we had recently received confirmation back from the State of Alaska DOT on the 2 grant-funded projects that we'd been working to secure that final grant paperwork with them for. And that is the ATAP project, the paving of the trails at Soldotna Creek Park, and the construction of the new sidewalk over to Homestead Lane, as well as the construction of Redoubt and Smith Way projects. So we now have those draft grant agreements that are acceptable both to the city and the state, and we know the final dollar amounts. If the council amends the ordinance by substitute, it would include funding for our matching portion of those 2 projects as well. So it would bring the total capital budget appropriation from the $495,000 that was originally proposed up to $1,011,063 by including our match for those 2 additional projects. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Public hearing is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? This is an opportunity to speak on both the ordinance and the proposed substitute, and copies of the proposed substitute are out in front there. Seeing no one wishing to speak, the item is back before the council. Mr. Carey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that a motion by substitution of ordinance 2021-015, and again, that the substitute that was presented to us would become the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Vice Mayor Parker. The report from the city manager on the second one, the substitute?
Nothing to add at this time, but I'm available for questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any council comments regarding the motion to amend by substitute? Okay, we need a vote on the motion to amend by substitute. Call the roll.
Councilmember Carey?
Yes.
Chilson?
Yes.
Parker? Yes. Hutchings?
Yes.
Ruffridge?
Yes.
Ugarte?
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Okay, the motion to amend by substitute has passed on a 6-0 vote. So the main motion is before us, the main ordinance. Any further comment, discussion by the council? I do have one question for the administration. The Soldotna Creek Park and Homestead Lane improvement, pave the existing park trails, new trail, Homestead Lane sidewalk. Is this the project we had in front of us like almost 2 years ago?
Yes, Mayor Whitney. This is the project that we were notified 2 years ago by the DOT that it was awarded for funding. And as recently as a few weeks ago, we finally received the documents necessary for us to move forward with that project. So we are thrilled to see it move forward. And it sounds like the DOT is ready to get moving as well, which is very good news for the community.
And if I remember, they wanted a larger amount at one time, and it looks like it's back down to the original amount.
That's correct, Mayor Whitney. So when we originally proposed the project, it requires a 9.03% match. When we applied for these grant funds, we proposed a 20% match. Subsequent to that, the DOT revised the overall cost estimate of the project. It tripled. And when we saw that much larger number, we began negotiating back and forth. Mr. Cornelis, Mr. Zarneski, we've all had lots of conversations, and what they have allowed us to do is essentially amend our ask back down to that 9.03%. So although their cost estimate for the project is still higher, they allowed us to revise down our match, resulting in a number that is much closer to what we originally envisioned spending. So I think it's a good result.
Good. I'm glad it's finally getting done. Okay, I didn't do the vote on the substitute yet. Okay. Call for the vote on the substitute ordinance 2021-015.
Councilmember Chilson?
Yes.
Parker? Hutchings?
Yes.
Ruffridge?
Yes.
Ugarte?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Okay, the substitute ordinance 2021-015 has passed on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to the next public hearing is on ordinance 2021-016, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $2,200 in the general fund for a donation received from the Soldotna Library Friends, introduced by the city manager. May I have a motion to enact? Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the adoption of ordinance 2021-016, increasing estimated revenues of $2,200 in the general fund for a donation received from Soldotna Library Friends.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Chilson. A report from the administration.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. There's a memo in the packet from City Librarian Rachel Nash. She's with us here tonight. I want to thank Rachel for continuing to partner and work with the Friends, the Soldotna Library Friends. This is a donation that will fund, in portion, our 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program, as well as providing supplies for our summer reading program. And just anecdotally, I'll note, I looked earlier today, in the last 5 years, the Soldotna Library Friends have donated more than $30,000 to the city. So it's a tremendous gift in that partnership. It goes to good work in working with our staff and how to use those funds. I want to thank Rachel and her team and certainly the Friends for continuing to bring these opportunities forward. Thank you.
Public hearing is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Seeing done, the item is back before the council. Are there any council comments? Seeing none, we'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Parker? Yes. Hutchings?
Yes.
Ruffridge?
Yes.
Ugarte?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Chilson?
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Ordinance 2021-016 has passed on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to agenda item 8, new business, would be resolution 2021-036, requiring that masks be worn in public indoor portions of city-owned buildings while the central Kenai Peninsula is experiencing substantial or high transmission of COVID-19, introduced by Mr. Ruffridge and Mr. Carey. May I have a motion to adopt? Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the adoption of resolution 2021-036, requiring that masks be worn in public indoor portions of city-owned buildings.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Ruffridge. A report from council members Ruffridge and Carey. Go ahead, Mr. Carey.
Obviously, I can speak only for myself. I believe that sitting on this council means that I have a fiduciary responsibility to every single person that works in this city, that we do all that we can to keep them safe, and that we separate them from undue possibility of illness. As is mentioned in the resolution itself, the Central Kenai Peninsula is experiencing substantial or high transmission of the COVID-19 illness. I believe this is prudent for us to protect. I believe there could be possible standing and grounds for a city employee if they felt they picked up this illness as a result of working for us. Second. I'm sorry. I want to go to my second point.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Second point. There is currently no vaccination for children. I believe also that as a member of this council, I have an obligation to do all I can to protect our kids. Again, I'm a teacher. I'm someone who's lived here forever since I was a kid here. And so that I see that this resolution, which few people probably actually want, but I certainly feel is necessary so that we can do, again, all that we can to protect our kids. The latest statistics from across the country are that many more young people are becoming ill, many more are in hospitals. And so that from my standpoint, this resolution is necessary to protect city employees, which I have a responsibility to do as a member of this council, and also to protect our kids, which I have a responsibility to do as a member of this community. Thank you.
Mr. Ruffridge, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was well said. Councilmember Carey. I will echo a lot of those comments in that this is not a resolution I feel like many people want to have to do, including myself. However, I'm bringing this as a sponsor today just because it's important that we take care of those indoor settings and the employees that we have in our city who are doing great work and want to be continuing to do great work. Indoor settings are high-risk transmission for COVID, and this would be a great way that we can continue to offer those services to people. And there's lots of other opportunities for us to continue to have services throughout the fall and winter. I hope to get your support.
Thank you, Mr. Ruffridge. Not yet. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we're back before, the item's back before the council. Go ahead, Mr. Ugarte.
Mr. Carey and Mr. Ruffridge, I understand what they say, and when they say they work for the people, a lot of people that I've been asking don't want to be wearing masks. A lot of the people that I've been asking personally don't believe that they work, and they don't want to be going into buildings when they have to wear a mask. I think it should be something where the person should decide whether they want to wear it or not, because then it's forcing other people who don't feel that they should or that they want to wear masks. And if we're working for our people, we're working for the people in our community. That's what I've been hearing from a lot of people who have been talking to me, that they don't want to be wearing masks when they go into buildings. They don't. Yes, COVID is real, but a mask ain't gonna stop it, and they don't want to wear it.
Any other comments from the council? Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I have a couple of questions for the administration. What is the current policy that you're using? And then secondly, the Section 6 is basically this ordinance, this resolution would stay in effect until repealed or amended. There would not be a sunset. And your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Councilwoman Parker. Through the mayor, the current policy that we have in place is for employees only. So as an employer, we have a fairly robust personnel policy that includes, requirements to check in with HR if you're symptomatic, getting tested if you're a close contact, quarantining. And recently, effective Monday, I reinstituted a mask wearing for employees in certain indoor settings. This was the policy that we had in place through May until I loosened it when the CDC loosened their public health recommendations. But I reinstituted it effective Monday for employees only. And currently it says that when our employees are in an indoor setting, when they're within 6 feet of a coworker or the member of the public, then they should have their mask on. Or when they're riding in a vehicle with a coworker, they should have their mask on. So that's something that I reinstituted. It doesn't apply to the public in our buildings. So really this resolution would speak directly to what are the expectations of the members of the public when they enter our city buildings. Your second question about the potential of a sunset, I'm open to that idea. It's been difficult for me to think ahead several months. This seems to be a situation that it just catches us by surprise every couple months at a time. What it says is that the requirement would be in effect when we're in the high alert times. So at any point in time, if the Central Peninsula dropped down below into the low or moderate risk level, that requirement would automatically be suspended. I would be open to the concept of a sunset. I don't know that I'd be able to offer much value in terms of what an appropriate length of time might be.
Any other, Mr. Ugarte?
Like people have told me, other people's fears, it does not take away from their constitutional right. And if you're scared that you're going to get it, or you're freaked out about going into a place, then it's okay for you to wear a mask. But don't make all of us wear it. I don't agree on that. I don't agree that that just because someone is scared of getting it, like we've had City Councilwoman Hutchins, she said that her friend has it, but yet her friend was vaccinated. So that just goes to show that no matter what happens, it's not going to go away. And we're starting to feel like our rights are being taken away. I personally feel that way. And when school starts, I'm not sending my son with the mask. I'm not. That's the way I feel. And a lot of people who I've talked to feel the same way. And I feel that it should be up to the decision of the people. We don't vote for them. We work for them. What the people tell us to do, that's what we do. We don't sit here and make decisions for them. If that's the case, then let's welcome communism. But a lot of people have told me I don't want to wear it. And a lot of people know that I work here in the city council. And I've told everybody, anybody who works in or who lives in the city of Soldana, I work for you. You're my bosses. I want to listen to what you have to hear because no one has ever listened to us. And I'm sick and tired of no one listening, of everybody's fear or drama taking over people who don't feel that way. And people should have the right to choose whether, if they want to walk into a building, if they feel, oh, you know what, I might get something, put on a mask. I don't think it's right for someone to say, why are you wearing a mask? If that person feels comfortable and that helps them feel better, that's up to them. And that's what people have been telling me. They don't want us to tell them that that they have to wear a mask. And I know that masks don't work. And I've done a study, a 100% study, a research study. I've done it myself. And if the council has time, I can say about it. Not to be gross or anything, but I'm lactose intolerant. And when I drink milk, it upsets my stomach. So there was times I would go to the store and I just couldn't hold it in. And I would let one out. And I would fog up an area. And people will walk by, and I actually had one lady who almost gagged. I didn't do it on purpose, but she almost gagged. So you're telling me that a mask that they're wearing can't stop my fart, but yet it's going to stop a virus? The science is not there. And if we're going by what the CDC is saying, the CDC has lied to us from the beginning of this. They said that this was not contractable to humans. This was only about in between animals. Until the CDC closes down the southern border with all those people that are coming through that have not been vetted, that they have COVID, that they're rejecting the COVID, then we should start listening to the CDC. That's when they care about Americans. But as of now, I don't believe them. They've lied. They helped the WHO and cover up all of this. And the proof is there. I'm not some fanatic that goes around, but I've done my homework. And I've asked people, and that's what all I've done. When I went down to Fairbanks this week for the AML, I was asking people in Fairbanks, and I was giving them my card and telling them, you know what, my name is Eric Ugarte. I'm from the City Council in Soldana. How do you guys up here in Fairbanks feel? They were telling me the same thing. Their rights are being taken away by city officials who vote what we feel or what we think it's right for the other people. And they're like, what happened to the people being able to vote for themselves, to be able to take the choice for themselves? And these were people that knew me here in Soldana who knew the Mexican, because that's what a lot of people know me by, Eric the Mexican. And a lot of people here will tell me, but when I was up in Fairbanks and I was hearing what my bosses that I work for here in the city of Soldana are telling me the same thing, it's not something that just one certain area is saying. This is spread out everywhere. In Fairbanks, they're sick and tired of having to wear the mask. The employees are upset about having to wear them. I was talking to one lady who says that she has to use more of a respirator because she can't be with the mask, but they have to if they have to work. They need to collect a paycheck, so they need to do what their bosses tell them. On that, I understand. But this is people who are coming into our building, choosing to come into our building. And that's what I have to say about this. This is what I've heard from the people who I work for, who are the people from Soldana, And that's what they've told me. Our rights are not to be taken away just because other people are scared.
Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things. I want to be very clear. This resolution has nothing to do with our schools. Okay, there's not something that we are saying anything about individuals going into the Kenai Peninsula Borough schools. So I want to be sure we don't
that's
get things
perfectly
mixed.
clear.
Second,
Yes, sir.
if I heard someone say that they wanted to allow the people to vote on this, that would seem to me a more valid discussion than a general statement that no one's ever been listened to. And I have to say, I first got on the assembly in 1972. And when I hear someone say, the public, no one has ever listened to the public, that's offensive because it's not true. Watch what we just did here tonight. We listened to, again, people dealing with the idea of funding to help them build something. I think huge statements like that no one has ever listened to the people, I don't think that's helpful as a comment. It isn't helpful for me to deal with someone if I know that if on any particular issue I don't agree, I'm going to hear from them that I have never, ever agreed with anyone on anything. And so I love discourse. I really do. I do this all the time and in many different areas. But I think we want to frame our discussion that certainly this is an area where there's a difference of opinion between people. But to say that this represents something where no one has ever been listened to, or that goes against all of representative democracy. And I sure don't want to go back and start talking about Hamilton and Jefferson and Washington, that they never ever listened to people. But certainly, I'm very aware that many people feel they are not being listened to. I would mention this was on the agenda. You know, we've got seats here again for people. I don't know that we put up any signs saying you may not come to this meeting and discuss this. And so that, to a certain extent, when people don't come to a public meeting, we have to use our best judgment. I'm using my best judgment that I believe there could be a case against the city if a city employee became ill because we did not follow this process. Two, I just want to look out for kids, and I hope everyone else wants to as well. And so again, I hope we keep this as a very positive discussion and that no one comes out of here with a black eye. Thank you.
Mr. Jolson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say that I do agree that as Americans, we are all entitled to a certain set of rights and liberties, but those rights and liberties all come with reasonable limits, and those limits come into play when the exercising of those liberties puts other people at risk. I believe as an employer, our employees have the right to feel safe in the workplace. They don't have a choice about who they're working around when they come into work each day, and we need to make sure that they're safe. So to that end, I fully support that we do this again to support our employees, make sure they're safe, support the public that is using our facilities, and I would like to say thank you to Councilman Ruffridge and to Councilman Carey for bringing this forward tonight. I fully support it.
Mr. Hugarte.
By the comment, sir, that I said that no one's ever listened to us, this is why I'm in city council. This is why, because I have, before when this mask mandate came out, we were talking to people, asking them, you know what, we don't need it. And no one was listening to us. That's what I mean by no one listens to us. That's the point why I got into the city council, because there's many people who think like me, who don't feel that we have to wear those masks. And city council, Chilson, sorry. You know, I understand what he says, where employees have the right to feel safe, and they should feel safe, but if they're already implementing that at the workplace, why do people who are coming in have to wear them? I'm just asking questions that people are asking me that they want me to ask the people here in the city council. So that's why I'm asking. And there's a lot of people that don't want to wear it. They don't want to wear it when they walk into building. It's just, like I said, that lady up there, they have to wear it because of work. Understandable. But it should not be something that we should tell people that they have to do. If anything, like Mr. Carey said, we should have it up for discussion and let people choose on their own. We're here to serve them, not to tell them what to do.
Any further discussion? I have a couple of comments. can't remember how long ago it was, but it's probably within 6 months, there was a resolution before the council about mandatory wearing of masks inside the city. I believe this council listened. We had over 500 emails, and that resolution did not go anywhere. I don't think it even got the votes to be introduced. So we listen. And when I hear that we don't, I guess I become a little concerned about that. We listen to that. We listen to anyone who ever talks to us or sends us an email. Second comment, I was in Mexico 6 months ago. No, not even 6 months ago, in March. Granted, I was only in one community, and that was Puerto Vallarta, which is a fairly large city. Everybody wore a mask. You couldn't go into any business anywhere without wearing a mask. You couldn't even walk around the condominium complex without wearing a mask. The only place you couldn't wear a mask, or didn't have to wear a mask, is that you were at the swimming pool. And at that point, the swimming pool, everybody was separated well over 6 feet, unless you were with your own family. So going back to that point again, we listen. I think we've done a good job of listening to what the community wants. This applies only to our city buildings. And that's all I have to say for now. Any other further discussion? We'll call for the vote now.
Councilmember Hutchings,
Yes.
Ruffridge,
Yes.
Ugarte,
No.
Carey,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Parker. You have 5 yes votes and 1 no vote.
Resolution 2021-036 passes on a 5-1 vote. We will now move on to the next item under new business, and that will be Resolution 2021-037, authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with the Kenai Peninsula Borough for 911 dispatch services for fiscal year 2022 in the amount of $350,000. Introduced by the city manager. May I have a motion to adopt? Thank you, Vice Mayor Parker. Mr. Carey for second. Report from the administration.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I've been providing some information to the council over the last several months about the status of our conversations back and forth with the Kenai Peninsula Borough and the communications center here in Soldotna that they manage and provide dispatch services for the city. If you recall, the city has not had a formal written agreement with the borough, but we have agreed to pay a fee for that service going back decades. Previous to this current fiscal year we're in, we were paying $150,000 a year for that service to the borough. And in January, the chief and I were informed that our new fees would be close to $490,000 per year. So that really sparked several months of working with the borough administration, going back and forth to assess kind of the new fee structure that they were proposing. We proposed alternatives. We discussed written agreements and the length of those agreements and who would be party to those agreements. So really it's a reimagining of how those services are paid for, prompted by the borough that really engaged us looking at this issue a little closely again. At this point, I think that our conversations with the borough are not likely to yield dramatically different results than where we've landed, which is that we kind of tentatively agreed to just a one-year solution of the city increasing our fees to $350,000 for fiscal year 22. If you recall, that's what we budgeted for, so the council approved those funds in our operating budget. And this resolution would authorize us to enter into a written agreement with the borough for the same services they've been providing us, but just through the remainder of this current fiscal year. What I'm recommending to the council that we do is reach out to the city of Kenai to seek their level of interest in engaging with discussions about potentially partnering with them for dispatch services moving forward. It has the potential, these interagency agreements traditionally can benefit multiple municipalities by achieving the same or potentially higher level of service and doing so at reduced cost. So really what I wanted to talk to the council about tonight was this idea of reaching out to the city of Kenai in a more formal way, seeing if there's interest on their side to engaging in these conversations and really doing the analysis and the due diligence to see if a potential Kenai-Soldotna partnership moving forward might benefit both cities. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions. Thank you, Mayor Whitney.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, it's back before the council. Are there any council comments? Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to our manager. Was there any data in terms of the total cost that the borough was going to spend on this particular service? Did they give you total amount is this amount?
Councilmember Carey, through the mayor, they have presented us with cost figures. We also do have access to the borough's approved budget for that center. I will say that it's a bit difficult for me to get my mind wrapped around all the moving pieces. The Soldotna Communications Center answers cell phone calls area-wide, and so they perform that centralized call answering service for a very large area. Then they're transferring calls to dispatch centers in the cities of Homer, Seward, Kenai. In addition, they perform that dispatch service for us and I think 13 to 15 other agencies. So it's the economics of this in terms of sitting down and looking at the numbers and having conversations about how to fairly and equitably distribute those costs are somewhat complicated. The revenue sources are multiple as well. So there's a $2 per line surcharge that the borough collects on an area-wide basis that funds a portion of those activities. There's also fees paid for by the different entities that are served. So yes, the majority of our conversations have focused exclusively on budget and trying to wrap our heads around those aspects of it, and conversations about how to fairly assess those costs to the user agencies that are served by the center.
If I could continue then, thank you, and you gave me exactly what I was hoping I would hear. In that already in place is a process by which every individual person is treated the same, a $2 fund per each individual receiving a service. And here's my point. The borough is greatly overtaxing the cities. If you look at what percent of the total people, the Kenai Peninsula Borough, the city of Soldotna makes, you know, what percent are we? Are we 3.8% of the entire population? It would seem to me that we should pay no more than the exact percentage of the population we are of that expense. And so if we are 3.8% of the people, and that's just a number I'm throwing up, then we shouldn't have to pay more than 3.8% of the cost. And as you said, there are also all kinds of other people. What I see is that because we're organized and because we have a tax base, the borough basically wants us to subsidize the service they're providing and put it on the people that pay taxes in Soldotna. And again, I would say the other entities as well in terms of Homer and Kachemak City and Seldovia and Moose Pass and Homer, wherever they can divide it up. And so that what I see with this is it's an example of overreach by big government saying that they can do whatever they want to the cities. And again, in truth, they have provided very good service most of the time, but we should not pay more than the percent of the service that we receive. And I find it very offensive that they would make this huge increase, 200+% increase in 1 year, without substantially showing how that they are going to provide that 2.5%, 250% increase in services. Somewhere there needs to be some give and take here. I very much support discussion with the city of Kenai. It seems to me this is really what we need to do. And if nothing else, it will provide us a comparison of costs so that if we can find out if we were with Kenai, it would cost this much. Whereas if we stay with the borough and they're overreach, they're going to cost us this amount, then we can make a good decision as to how we should spend the funds of the city of Soldotna. I thank you very much for the work you're doing on this. And I do understand it's a complex issue. I've worked on it a little bit in the past. Thank you.
Ms. Hutchings.
Today, I decided I would pull the most current budget figures from the Kenai Peninsula Borough for the 911 Communications Center. And I think the thing that was the most striking is how everybody else's fees went down and Soldotna's went up. But in addition to that, they're building a fund balance of $1.7 million. Since when did 911 sit there to make money? They're supposed to be passing through a service. So I encourage Stephanie to go ahead and work with the city of Kenai. I think it will do nothing but save us money.
Mr. Hugarta, you had your hand up.
I'd like to also say thank you to Stephanie for doing all that research and all that work and helping us out. And like Mr. Carey said, now we'll be able to see with Kenai, and then we'll be able to see how it was with us, or like we have discussed before, us opening up our own center. So Mr. Carey, Ms. Hutchins, and everybody said, I'd like to say thank you for doing that research to help out our city and try to make something that's ours, somewhere where, like Mr. Carey says, big government's not overreaching and taking, like he says, if they were going to charge 200%, what else more was that going to bring to us by us paying that? So I do like that Ms. Hutchins asked you to work with the city of Kenai. That way we can start working on something sooner than later.
Squeen, you
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I appreciate the feedback, and I want to make sure that it's clear that we 100% respect and value the work of the dispatch center. That is a very difficult job, and they serve a lot of different urgent needs. And so primarily, this is not an issue of dissatisfaction with the work that's happening at that dispatch center, with the managers there, with the support staff there. It's really a question of service that can be provided in multiple different ways. And the significant reorganization of the borough's relationship with the state of Alaska, the proposed new fee structure, makes this an opportune time for the city of Soldotna to reevaluate our options. And regardless of how we provide for dispatch services for the Soldotna Police Department, whether it's staying with the borough to provide that service, working with another municipality like Kenai, or as you mentioned, standing up that service within our own municipality, regardless of which option end up being chosen, we will maintain a very close working relationship with the folks at the Soldotna Center. They are the primary answering point, and the services they provide for public safety are essential. So as I mentioned, it's really about somewhat of a business decision, really looking at our options and looking at the partners that are capable of providing that service, and ultimately making a decision about what's going to be in the best interest of the community that we serve.
Mr. Chilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question to the administration. If there are any amount of significant initial cost to stand up whatever path forward we go with, if it's not with it's not a continuation with Kenai Peninsula Borough, do we have opportunity to utilize American Rescue Plan funding for any of those one-time costs?
Thank you, Councilmember Chilson. The answer to that is yes. So we've got the ordinance potentially appropriating the ARPA funding. Actually, that funding, the first tranche, is already on its way. It may have landed in our bank account even today. I saw in an email today that first tranche of about $550,000 was on its way. And Melanie Imholt, our finance director, has confirmed that because of the formula allowing us to use a portion of those funds as revenue replacement, we would qualify to use all those funds really for any essential municipal service. And certainly whether it's software improvements or capital expenses or even personnel expenses related to public safety and dispatch, those would qualify as eligible expenses.
Perfect. Again, I think the ideal solution being that we can come to some kind of agreement with the borough, because if we can work that out, I think that's mutually beneficial for everyone. But of course, if that's removed from the table, I do fully support continued talks with Kenai and trying to work out something with them. My ideal solution would be if we pursue with Kenai, it's not necessarily us contracting services with them, but I'd love to see some kind of development where it's a partnership, where it's a joint municipal dispatch center that we could work towards growing. And then, of course, lastly, if Kenai can't cost effectively offer those services, I would also fully support standing up our own dispatch center, although that would be the last resort. So thank you for your efforts on this.
Any other questions or discussion? Vice Mayor Parker.
Councilmember Ruffridge, did you have comment?
I did. I can wait, though.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Just a question for the administration. I fully support the idea of moving forward and seeing all options. One of the questions I had, though, was in regard to dollar amount already appropriated in our budget, that's set, is that correct? Or is it possible to negotiate some lower amount than the 350,000?
Councilmember Ruffridge, through the mayor, the appropriation in the budget is an authorization. So it appropriates up to that amount for us to use. I had intended for the city to provide that to the borough this year. We're paying it quarterly, so we've already paid the first of 4 invoices for that amount. We don't currently have a written agreement. I will tell you that the borough is firm in their assessment that not only is 350 a one-time deal, they believe it's low. So their intention would be for that number to increase. They have invited us to engage in continued meetings back and forth. We are happy to do that. Certainly it's to every municipality and every agency's benefit to continue meeting periodically and working together. But at this point, we don't have a written agreement, but that is the dollar amount that the council has set aside for FY22, and I would recommend that that's an appropriate amount to pay the borough for the current fiscal year we're in.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I had a number of questions. So as we proceed, and we just began this with the beginning of the fiscal year with the borough taking over, will the borough be providing us with data that shows how many calls they responded to within the city of Soldotna?
Councilwoman Parker, through the mayor, yes, we have access to that data now. There's a fairly robust computer-aided dispatch system, a CAD system that tracks all the different calls for service. So we do have access to some data as well as how we compare to the other agencies. One of the potential discussion points was whether that's the appropriate metric to base cost on, and we've had a lot of discussions back and forth about that. But the borough has been willing to share with us data about some of those metrics in summary.
Okay. And then following up, 2 questions relating to the level of service with the new dispatch. Is the police department satisfied with the level of service they're receiving, and are you happy with what you're seeing from 911?
Councilwoman Parker, through the mayor, unfortunately, Chief Milnarek is out this week, but he has shared with me that generally, yes, we're satisfied with the level of service we receive from the dispatch center. COVID made it slightly more challenging. It was more difficult to walk across the street and engage kind of on a person-to-person level. There is some complication now with just staffing, trying to fill positions. Those are high-stress positions. They're high-turnover positions. Training requirements are significant. So it may be that presently they're still trying to fill some positions to get fully staffed up, but generally our belief is that, yes, we're satisfied with the level of service.
My recollection is that staffing at the 911 center has been an issue over a number of years, so this isn't something new that's just cropped up. Previously, with the agreement that we had received from the borough, you had some concerns outside the number. Have you been able to get those resolved to where it's satisfactory and you'll feel comfortable signing the agreement should the council approve that?
At this point, I'm comfortable signing this agreement because it's really only for the current fiscal year we're in. Some of the concerns I had earlier on, some of the things that were essential for the city negotiating were securing a multi-year agreement with the borough, because I don't think it's appropriate for us to be potentially tasked with widely varying costs on a year-to-year basis. So a multi-year agreement moving forward would be something that is necessary to provide some stability for the city. At this point, that's not being considered. We just have the one-year agreement. Ultimately, long-term, another really key point was to reinstitute this advisory committee. There is in Borough Code a 911 Dispatch Emergency Services Advisory Committee with designated seats from the different cities, the different user agencies. I see a lot of practical value in having a group like that, but it's been defunct. They haven't met in years. And since the beginning of our discussions, that was, from my standpoint, something that was essential to us continuing this engagement moving forward, so that that advisory group could assess significant policy changes, staffing changes, budget questions, capital investment questions. And at this point, the borough has indicated that they're open to getting that group back together. They have not committed to get it back together in the way that it's currently in borough code. So the current draft they presented us indicated that the mayor intended to take an ordinance to the assembly repealing that section of code and replacing it with something different. From my perspective, that would probably be something not as favorable from our perspective. And so we've just been encouraging those meetings to happen. I think from our perspective, they could have started happening already. The borough has told us that they're willing to do that, but so far it hasn't occurred.
Okay. And a final comment, and we have a constituent chirping at us behind here.
Good hearing aids, I can hear them now.
Yeah.
Where's this
Yeah.
coming from?
So I do, we have pursued in the past and continue to have arrangements with the city of Kenai, and so I would encourage the administration to continue those discussions moving forward and seeing if there is a way where we can benefit both cities' work and have a cooperative 911 answering service. So, thank you.
Any other comments from the council? Mr. Carey?
I would seriously like to see us look into what I brought up in terms of the issue of us subsidizing the others. Again, as a former borough mayor, that we dealt with this a lot. I'd be interested to know how much of the federal funds the borough has received have they put into this. So we'll have, again, a significant amount of the revenue to fund this, again, has already been provided by the federal government. And so again, as they look at the percentages of what we should pay. But I think that we would find that the city of Soldotna is significantly subsidizing the rest of the borough. Part of our discussion, I hope, and I very much agree that the committee that's in place should be actually activated. I'd be a little bit concerned after what we heard tonight that the city wouldn't be allowed to pick who represents the city in terms of the current administration, but I won't deal with that. But I do think truly we are overpaying to go from 150,000 up to 350,000 in 1 year, and they actually want to go closer to 500,000. I'd like to see them verify in writing why we're now receiving that amount more services. I think they will not do that, because what it would show is that the people of the city of Soldotna are subsidizing the rest of the borough. And I think that's wrong. And I very much want to end with the services provided by that center is critical and vital, and they do such a good job with such a difficult task. And so again, I very much appreciate our manager standing up strongly in the beginning, end, and I'll say even the middle of our discussion with the fact that the people who work there, it's a very difficult job and it's very stressful, and they do an excellent job. And so this should in no way be a reflection on the job being done. It's simply a question of who should be paying and how much. Thank you.
Any other comments? I do have a couple. I think some of the issues we had with the presentation the borough made on this, how much our cost would be, is there was a difficult time trying to figure out what the allocation of costs were to the city of Soldotna. It seemed to be an issue that wasn't brought up or wasn't addressed very well by the borough. I believe there was even indications that some employees that were working there, their costs were being allocated to us when they really didn't have any, they weren't doing anything for us. It was something that should have been a borough issue. So the advisory group, I know that was a discussion that came up during these discussion. I didn't see that in this agreement. Is that something that would be addressed separately?
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. In the current draft of the agreement, I believe it's section 4. which is language that the borough proposed. It's not language that the city had proposed. So our version of this agreement had suggested that the borough reactivate the advisory committee as it exists in borough code, and that group be tasked with kind of having these very big policy discussions and recommending to the administration things about budgeting, staffing, personnel, capital, et cetera. The language in Article 4 is the borough's response to our request, simply suggesting that the borough mayor intends to repeal that section or bring an ordinance forward to the assembly doing that and replacing it with something else. I think that leaves a lot of uncertainty for the city in not knowing exactly what that new advisory board would look like, how it would be made up, what it would be tasked with, and it also adds significant delay. And so as this was something we've been talking about for many months, it seemed to me that it pushes decision-making even further into the future. Right now, we're in a one-year agreement where we're really trying to assess all of our options. That's why, in part, I think it's more important that if there's interest on our side and from the City of Kenai's side in engaging in those more formal discussions, I think now's an appropriate time to do that.
Kind of sounds like the Planning Commission. I'm happy that we're looking at joining forces with the City of Kenai on dispatching. I know there's other entities out there that are also would be interested possibly on taking on our dispatching services. So there's other options out there. I think we should definitely look at them. And that's all I have on that right now. So any other last-minute comments? Seeing none, we will call for the vote.
Councilmember Ruffridge,
Yes.
Ugarte,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Parker, Hutchings.
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Resolution 2021-037 passes on a 6-0 vote. Moving on to the next item, which looks like it's mayor council comments. Or did I miss something?
The resolution, the purple.
Ooh, okay. Resolution 2021-040, supporting the efforts of the Canetsi Indian Tribe to secure grant funding for fixed route bus service on the Central Kenai Peninsula, introduced by Mr. Chilson. May I have a motion to adopt?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would move to adopt Resolution 2021-040.
And thank you, Mr. Carey. And I would say a report from the administration, but I'll ask for a report from Mr. Chilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll provide what I can and maybe defer to Mr. Zarneski where appropriate. So essentially what's happening here is the Kenaitze Tribe is applying for a grant through the Federal Transit Administration. We actually just received this at the city today, so that's why we're dealing with the laydown tonight. But the gist of it is they are trying to establish a 2-year pilot project for a fixed bus route system that would span 3 central corridors on the Central Peninsula area. So the first corridor that they would service would be from Nikiski through Kenai down to Soldotna. And the second being Sterling through Soldotna down to the K Beach Sterling intersection, and then the other being the K Beach Sterling intersection looping down K Beach into the Kenai area. So again, it's a 2-year bus pilot with 2 active routes that span those 3 sections. Their idea being that these would be a regularly scheduled service that would operate, I believe it's Monday through Saturday, and then they would have bus stop signs that would go up mounted on existing street signs that would say bus stop, and they'd have some kind of Kenaitze branding on those as well. But I think that's all I have to provide on this at this time, unless Mr. Zarneski has additional content to add.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chilson, Mr. Mayor. I would say that the only other comment is in speaking with Brandy Bell of the Kenaitze Indian Tribe. She had indicated that that their intent for this program is not to compete with the carts or the cab companies. It's really to partner with them. And the response so far that she said they've received from the borough and from the city of Kenai is that that they also feel it would enhance those systems in that this fixed route would get people from one general location to another, and then they would be able to use either a cab or carts or other service to get from, say, a drop-off point at Fred Meyer's to a doctor's office at some other location or to some other place within the city of Soldotna. So I wanted to share with you the thoughts that have been shared with me with regard to the compatibility of those systems.
And John, if I could just add, I mean, you and I had both participated in meetings for many, many years where planning had been done in the central region. The idea of a fixed route or some deviation of that has been proposed as something that could be added to the system. And so this wouldn't be a new concept necessarily. It'd be one that would potentially be supported by past planning efforts as well.
I believe this is currently something that would align with our current comprehensive plan as well as the borough's recent comprehensive plan as well. So.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back before the council. Are there any additional council comments? Mr. Hugarte.
I'm really glad that City Councilman Chilson is doing this. We actually learned about this at the AML this week when we went, where they were talking about bus services. And it's one thing that I've always, that I know a lot of people that don't have vehicles, they don't have money to get on the carts or on the Alaska cab, is I grew up on the bus system back home. I didn't have a vehicle, so I knew which bus to take. And they were saying they could drop you off at Fred Meyer's. There could be a drop off, and then from there, you could go to a taxi or something, you know? But I think it's something that would help out our city. This is something that we do need, and it would help out a lot of people that are, a lot of people right now, most of them, they can't go to a job because they don't have transportation. I'm thinking by us doing this, this would take the excuse of, oh, I don't have no way to get to work, because now there would be public transportation like they're trying to do, and it would help out the city. And, you know, in the summertime, people would love to ride the bus and take a tour around the beauty scenario that we have around here. So thank you for doing that. It's something that we really need and something that the city really needs for a while.
Any other comments? I do have one for either Mr. Jilson or Mr. Zarneski. If they receive the grant, when do they anticipate they could be starting this up?
I'm going to defer that to Mr. Zarneski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I recall seeing a date, but now for the life of me, I do not have that in front of me. But it wasn't far off. Let me just quickly scan through this, see if it was included in this. I don't see it. So, sorry, I can't provide you a better estimate, but it wasn't more than 2 years out that if they got the grant, they would be have their pilot system up and running.
Thank you. I know this is something that's been discussed for many, many years in all kinds of different contexts. It is something that's needed here. So we will move on to call for the vote.
Councilmember Hugarte?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
Chilson?
Yes.
Parker? Hutchings? Yes. Ruffridge?
Yes.
You have 6 yes votes.
Resolution 2021-040 passes on a 6-0 vote. Guess we're down to item 9, Mayor and Council reports. My report is a couple of things here. First off, just a reminder that the resolution that passed on the wearing a mask in this building will take effect on Monday, the 16th. I believe that's the correct date. And at our next meeting, we will be required to wear masks during that meeting. So, next one is I attended the AML conference in Fairbanks. There was the Council of Mayors had the presentation made by the Committee on Youth. I can't remember exactly what they called it. The youth group. They presented a number of resolutions, which sent out to each one of you, and they did a very good presentation. They were in age from, I'd say, 16 to about 24, 25 years old. They presented quite a few of those resolutions. There's some of them that I think are very good. The only thing they might need is some tweaking in the language. They haven't got the experience that a lot of councils and council members have, but there's some good suggestions, and it may be something that we want to look at. The one thing that they did really state is that they would like to be more involved in local government and in different things that we do. We do have a student representative here. I spoke with the city manager and the city clerk and into looking into how we could get that representative maybe a little more involved, not necessarily in the debates, but asking their opinion on some of the resolutions and ordinances we have in front of us. We had 2 members from Soldotna on that group, and they were Quinn Cox and Jackson Blackwell. So it was a good presentation, well received, and I think they're looking at planning on doing that more often, maybe every other year, to have that group come together. COVID. Unfortunately, my son was unvaccinated, and he now has COVID, and he's not doing real well. It's an unfortunate thing. Been now 10 days. Yeah, 10 days. So we're hoping for the best. And so I'm a little different today without a tie on and everything, and I'm in the process of moving from one location to another. And I went to go get dressed to come to the meeting, and I'll put this on. And it's not here. It's at the other place. And I go to look for a tie. It's at the other place too. I almost had to come barefoot because I forgot socks, but I had found a pair. So that's why this outfit tonight. I would like to tell the city staff that the flowers out in front of this building look absolutely gorgeous. They do an outstanding job. They look great. It really helps to beautify our city hall, and I want to thank them. Then the last thing I will talk about, which we touched on earlier, is planning. This afternoon, I received, and I think Shelley received that same email. The borough presented 3 names. Ms. Hutchings was one of them, and then there was 2 others. I haven't had a chance to completely review that, but I'm going to sit down with the city manager, and hopefully we will come up with a proper response to what is taking place. And then once that letter is written, I hope to bring it back to the council next meeting so you can see it. I don't think what they're doing is proper, and I think we're going to take a look at different scenarios on how to answer that. I sat on that planning commission for 6 or 7 years, or maybe it was 5 or 6 years. And things that have been done in the past are all of a sudden being changed for whatever reason. And like I said, there's been a number of emails back and forth, memos back and forth discussing the opinion. We have yet to see that opinion, whether it's a legal opinion or somebody else's opinion. So I would certainly like to see that and see how they're basing this whole scenario on. If it's a good opinion, then maybe they're right. But I have suspicions as soon as they don't want to present the opinion that something else is going on. So hopefully by the next meeting we'll have some response to that, and we will submit the name that that we think is the recommendation.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Mr.
could I
Curran.
ask, who determined the three names?
Okay, the borough advertised borough-wide for anyone to apply for the city of Soldotna's position.
Okay.
They came up with three names. Like I said, Ms. Hutchings was one of them, and then there was two others. That is totally contrary to what's been done in the past.
Right.
This is a city of Soldotna appointment, and it should be somebody from the city of Soldotna that has a vested interest in our city. We had advertised, I don't remember exactly when it was and how long we advertised for. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the mayor. So we received notification in early May from the borough that we had a vacancy coming up. So we advertised for roughly 3 weeks and received no applicants, which the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, which is what happened 9 years ago or 8 years ago when the Mayor Whitney was originally appointed, we asked the commissioners if anyone was interested, and that's when, excuse me, Councilmember Hutchings was serving as the ex officio, and she volunteered.
That's, it's something that's back here because I'm doing the same thing.
So my point where I was trying to go is, were there other people who also applied? Or should I assume then that those are the only three people that said they were interested in Soldotna? Do we know if that was the totality of those who applied?
I can only assume that they were. We were just forwarded the three names. I don't know if there was more.
I would hope at least ask, because if there were more, I'd like to know what the criterion was that they used to determine which names we should have submitted to us. As you certainly know, that's the upside down of the process. We send them a name, they consider it, okay? Rather than they send us names and we consider it. It's backwards. Do we know, are the other individuals, since I know of one, are the other individuals on the list, are they residents of the city of Soldotna? Do we know that?
One is not.
One is not, okay. I very much appreciate your comments on this, thank you.
And a couple other things I'll bring up about that. Some of the mayors I spoke to in Fairbanks are really opposed to this proposed ordinance that may be coming up on the borough and the way they're doing things on the planning commission. It was also brought up in the conference of mayors that it should be something that is looked at on a state level. So there's some opposition to this. I know personally I oppose it, and my recommendation would be that the city opposes it if it becomes an issue. So something else that came up at AML in Fairbanks, which concerns me, is a lot of discussion on the state budget and what's going on in the future and what this group is going to represent and how to, broad-based funding of the state budget. And it seemed to be a very strong indication that the state may be looking at a statewide sales tax. And that, of course, will have an effect, a very large effect on communities who have sales tax. One of the comments that was made is, maybe they could, if they implement a state sales tax, they won't do it for the cities that have it and just only do it for the cities that don't. And that would start a civil war in the state of Alaska. I don't know where that one came from, but that was. And I would say the general consensus of the attendees in our last meeting was that the state should be considering a statewide sales tax. A statewide personal income tax. That seemed to be the general consensus, and Mr. Hugarty may have had a different opinion, but that was my feeling is everyone felt that that would tax people with high incomes, it tax people who work here but don't live here, who don't contribute a whole bunch to the state coffers. So this may be coming down. There was also some discussion that when they go into special session, what's going to come out of that is really up in the air. But they said there could be the distinct possibility that they'll go into session and immediately adjourn and call it quits. So it's been an issue for state funding now for 6 years, and we've pretty much heard the same stories for 6 years. We've got to do something. We got to do something. Well, and they said, oh, we're going to do it this year. Oh, we're going to do it this year, next year. And it's been about 6 years, and nothing's been done. So maybe we'll see some movement. I'm not real confident in it, but we'll see what happens. I think I've talked enough tonight, so we will move on to council reports on boards and commissions. Planning and Zoning Commission, Mr. Ruffridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Zoning Commission was a short meeting, just a replat that was approved unanimously. And no questions, I can also report on Parks and Rec. I will move on to Parks and Rec.
Okay, go ahead to Parks and Rec.
Parks and Recreation meeting was a lengthy discussion regarding the Memorial Park and personal decorations. It seems to still be an issue where guidance is needed. They discussed at length and decided on a work session during the next Planning and Zoning meeting, or Parks and Rec meeting. So that will be occurring then. And that concludes my report.
Moving on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. We had quite a bit on the agenda today and even some late additions. Thank you for your flexibility with those. So I didn't prepare a formal report. I will say thank you for a couple of the discussions tonight. There's work to be done. And I know it can be more difficult for the council to engage in a decision when we're early in the process of something. From our perspective, sometimes it's absolutely necessary to get some early indications from the council about preferences and direction. So I thank you for engaging in those conversations that then we'll take it from here and come back later with a more finished product. We, on the COVID front, I'll let you know, we've had 3 employees out in the last 2 weeks that were COVID positive. We've had more employees who were close contacts and quarantining. So I appreciate the discussion tonight. It'll put our employees in a difficult position, certainly in enforcing this. I'll give some guidance to them. We'll do a lot of communication and signage. Ultimately, we will rely on folks from the public largely to comply with those requests. But I do appreciate your support, and I hope, as it was stated, that this is a scenario that as soon as these case numbers can come back down, hopefully soon, we'll be in a position where that's not necessary anymore. But I do appreciate your support and the comments about our employees. I want to thank our department heads who were here tonight, stayed till the end of the meeting. Glad that there were so many positive comments about the flowers. Just anecdotally, I was at Trinity picking up baskets early this year, and I happened to pick the same flower that they do for us for downtown. And the owner of the greenhouse mentioned how exhausted and how much work our crew had been doing with the new trees that went in, with the baskets. It really does, it's starting to turn this place around in a really positive way. So I want to thank all of our department heads. Andrew's here tonight, John, Kyle, as well as sticking it through the meeting with us tonight. And that concludes my report.
We haven't had anybody appropriating our flower beds this year. Oh, boy. Okay, we'll move on to item 11 on the agenda, public comments. Now, members of the public will have 3 minutes to comment. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment? If you could please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. My name is Judith Queen, and my esteemed daughter-in-law, Stephanie, is right over here. I live at 115 Henrich Circle in Soldotna, have since 2012, although I've lived in the Kenai, Soldotna, and Nikiski area for almost all my life. I don't know if it was my name that was put forward to you for the Planning Commission. Perhaps I can shed some light on what I know about what the process has been. I wasn't sure that Mrs. Hutchings was at the borough level for the been put forth for the Planning Commission. I was solicited to apply as a member, and as you probably know, you have a concurrent Planning Commission position for the city, and then there's also one for the borough. And that's where the confusion has come in. I would not be a candidate for the city for a potential conflict of interest. But because of my prior experience as the district recorder for the state of Alaska, 3rd Judicial District for several years, and working as a paralegal and in offices dealing with real estate documents, papers, and plats, I was solicited to apply for the Borough Planning Commission position. So there is apparently some confusion. I certainly would not want to get in the middle of anything usurping anybody's procedure here. I was not aware of a prior publication. If you only publish it in the newspaper, there is a problem with soliciting folks to apply for these positions. I suppose that affront has been taken when, from my part, none was meant. You haven't seen my face at the city council meetings, but I have been active in the city in working in your borough, your elections almost every year, plus my prior experience. So anyway, that's how, if I was one of the 3 names that was presented to you, that is why. And there was no ulterior motive to usurp any authority or circumvent any procedure, certainly not on my part. So I hope that's enlightening, if not informative.
Yes, it is, and I'll ask the city clerk to explain how we did our advertising for the position originally.
Okay, I had not seen advertising at the borough level. I see for the city level, and I don't feel that I would be appropriate to apply for that position via nepotism or conflict of interest.
Thank you. Through the mayor. So we published the advertisement in the newspaper, posted it on our Facebook, and also posted it at the public librarian here at City Hall, which is the Facebook posting is beyond the normal posting requirements.
And that would be for the city of Soldotna's position on the borough planning.
On the borough, okay.
Yep. So
Well,
we advertised that position for, what do you say, about 3 weeks?
okay.
And
And what month was that?
Thank you. Through the mayor, that was in the month of May.
Okay, so I was solicited to apply after that.
Yeah, that was, like I said, our normal procedure is, as the city clerk mentioned, and it's arbitrarily changed by action of the borough.
I see. Well, certainly no ill intent on my part.
No, we understand that. I think
Okay.
You may have gotten caught in the middle of something that's been going on now for 3
Okay.
months.
All right, well,
Okay. Go ahead.
Nice to see you here, Judy. I'm glad you get to see a little bit more about my day job.
Now I know.
And I didn't know you were interested, and I would just say, I'm sure as the council would thank you for your interest in serving.
Yeah.
It's always difficult to find people willing to serve in those capacities. So
Sure,
thank you.
And you do want to make it clear to the general public, because in soliciting me to apply, it's like people say, well, I didn't know about it. Well, I didn't know about it. And in capacity of utilizing you volunteers or soliciting people to fill positions, you almost have to get a ring and pull them by the nose to work. So I'm sorry. If you would like me to withdraw, I certainly would.
We'll figure this out.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for your time, and
Okay.
I am
Thank
glad to be here. Sometimes I keep the kids, so I haven't been able to come, but I didn't have to keep them tonight. So
Yeah. Thank you for your
thank you, and thank you, folks, for the great work that you do. I know it's over and above your normal days, so kudos to everyone.
all right. Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to comment, we'll move on to council member comments. And we'll start with Mr. Ruffridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to all for putting up with me on the telephone tonight. Thank you for a good meeting. No other comments.
Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight was one of the best meetings I feel that we've had, and I want to voice very much how much I enjoy. This, to me, is the way the public dialogue should be held. We did have a couple items brought before us, and so that, again, we were able to deal with it. One of the strengths I saw tonight is that I heard from every single board member, a council member, outside research they had done to prepare themselves to come in here and to debate and discuss what was before us. You hear some interesting tales in terms of what people believe goes on. And I know that each of the other five do a lot of hard work, and they do it on behalf of the people of the city, and again, all the different groups. And so I just want to say I enjoyed it. I very much like dialogue. And again, particularly when we don't all agree. I find it makes me sharper when I can hear someone bring up ideas I have not thought about in the part of the discussion, so that it then becomes a part of my contemplation of things. Mr. Mayor, when you mentioned in terms of a tie and maybe even socks, I want to let you know I missed you last meeting. And I missed you because I knew that you were sick. And that bothered me. And then, as you know, a few days after that, in a fraternal situation, I saw you. And you were very sick. I hope you realize that you are our mayor. And I can't speak for every other council member, but I want to tell you right now, Paul, you are my mayor for Sultana. I greatly appreciate what you do. The idea that now, again, you're changing houses, understandably, and when you brought up about a family member with COVID, that's very distressing. But I want to extend to you as best as I can my support for who you are as a person, who you are as the mayor of the city, and the work that you do on behalf of all of us. And I thank you very much.
Well, thank you for those very nice comments, Mr. Carey. Appreciate that. Vice Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor Whitney. I have a number of comments because I figured I'd save them for the end as opposed to injecting them during some of the longer dialogue. I want to reiterate what a number of council members have said. We are blessed here at the city to have a phenomenal staff. They take on tasks. It seems like every meeting there's another task that gets added, and they take it on, and the work that they do is phenomenal. They do due diligence, they do the research, they look at options, alternatives, and I don't think every city gets the quality of service that we get here from the staff that we have at the city of Soldotna. I'd like to move on, and you mentioned receiving a letter from Mayor Pierce regarding appointment to the Soldotna Planning Commission, and I hope as you look at this that I've said this before, and I'll reiterate it till the end. I believe it is important for us to follow Alaska statute and borough code, because should we not, we will set a precedent, and other people will then again say, well, they bent the law that way, so we're going to bend the law too. So I hope we listen to the mayors that attended AML, that we follow the statute and we follow the borough code as we look at who we are going to recommend to the borough to appoint to the Planning Commission. And we have made that recommendation, and at this point, unless we re-advertise, I say we stick with our recommendation. I am happy to see the Kenaitze put forward a application to Federal Transit Administration to potentially look at getting some mass transit here in the Central Peninsula area. I think it would be an added benefit to our area, and hopefully 2 years from now we'll be able to say, yeah, we can ride the bus, and I can ride the bus to Nikiski and not have to drive my car. Moving on, you mentioned that we've been talking about having a fiscal plan and for the last 6 years. Back in 2004, myself and a number of other people from around Alaska were appointed by Governor Murkowski to attend the Conference of Alaskans. And at that time, we emphasized the need for the state to develop and have a fiscal plan. At that time, we said we need to have for the permanent fund a % of market value. And it took from 2004 to 2018 to even get a POMV. So this has been around for a long time. It's kind of like developing natural gas from the North Slope. It's taken, we're 40 years into it, and is it going to ever happen? So will we ever get a fiscal plan? I hope we do, and I think by Alaskans convening, whether it's the Conference of Young Alaskans or Conference of Alaskans, once again to come together and help develop a solution to present to the legislature, maybe that's an option. Thank you to the Soldotna Library Friends for your support over the years. And to hear that it's $30,000, I mean, it seems like it's every other council meeting we're getting, accepting funds that they're appropriating, and so thank you for that. And finally, to you, Mayor Whitney, and to those city staff members who have had contracted COVID, I wish you a speedy recovery, and that we increase our vaccination rates here within the Central Peninsula. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Mayor Parker. Mr. Chilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No comments tonight.
Mr. Hugarte.
I just want to say it's an honor to be able to work with you. It's not personal when I talk. It's just business. This is what I'm doing for the people that I work with, and I do like Mr. Carey said, there's times when there's discussion that makes it seem we're seeing other people's point of view instead of just seeing ours. So like I said, I plan to work here with you guys for a while. Thank you, Mayor, for everything. It was nice to go and sit down up there and actually understand what the AML was talking about. I was there and I was like, I know what they mean by that, and I know that. So it was nice to be able to do that. And just thank you to everybody. And like I said, it's not personal. It's business, and it's for the people that I work with. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Hugarte. Ms. Hutchings.
Well, I'm going to make a comment about the lovely flowers out here. When I looked at the gladiolas, I thought of Mayor Anderson, because he always had all those glads planted there on Marydale. And for those of you that still aren't quite bought into COVID, vaccines, masks, I will tell you I have lost 5 friends in the last 2 months and another one today. So it is real. And to be respectful of your friends, your neighbors, and your relatives is most important. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda is executive session. There is no reason for one. And next one is meeting and announcements. August 25th, 2021, City Council meeting at 6 p.m. here in the chambers, and we will be required to wear masks. Having nothing more before us, meeting